Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, we're discussing fostering independence in children with learning challenges and developmental delays. Often we focus on what children struggle with rather than the incredible potential they have for independence. And today, we're flipping that script. Joining me are two incredible experts, Kristin Lombardi and Dr. Christine Drew, co-authors of the book Spectrum of Independence. Kristin is a board-certified behavior analyst who helps children and families prepare for independent living. And Dr. Drew is an assistant professor at Auburn University and has extensive experience working with students with disabilities. Together, they provide science-based strategies for helping neurodivergent children build autonomy in their daily lives. Let's begin.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Welcome, Kristin and Christine. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, we appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you being here. And the topic of today's discussion about independence is so important to so many families in our community. So again, thank you for highlighting a need to talk about this particular topic and for the book that you're writing. Well, actually, the book that you've written right now, you can pre-order it. And by the time this episode airs, you might actually already be able to order it and have it in your hands. But again, such an important topic, and so glad that you're here to have a talk with me about it.
Yes, we're very happy to be here to share info.
So your book highlights, and we kind of talked about this in the intro, that we often talk too much about deficits and not enough about potential. And is that what prompted you to write this book? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
So actually, what prompted the book being written was we were at a lunch for an inclusive higher education conference in Syracuse. And I was one of the few K-12 providers there. The vast majority of people there were from the higher ed level, and including Christine. And there was a lot of talk from the college side of things about how kids were showing up to the inclusive higher ed programs not as independent as they really needed to be. And so that led me to sort of wonder what can I be doing? Because I'm working with them at these younger ages, getting them ready to go to these programs. And so I reached out to Christine and I said, we got to figure out a way to bridge this gap, right? To get them when I have them younger, when they're in the home, so that they're actually ready to come to you. And I'm the one that works with them when they're younger, but Christine's the one who really knew what they needed to be able to do to be successful.
And a little bit about inclusive higher ed. So inclusive higher ed programs are programs that offer a college experience for students with intellectual disability. So that could include a lot of kinds of neurodiversity. There are also autism-specific programs. They're a little different, but there are opportunities for students with neurodiversity to access college experiences. And what happens is, they arrive on campus and we do our best to support them, but some of them are living on campus. Some of these programs are residential. So, students are doing that same transition to college that typically developing students are doing. And there is still, of course, a margin for error, right? We all, as undergrads, did the thing where we didn't do our laundry for a month and we were wearing a bikini top under a t-shirt, and calling that an outfit. And so there is this learning curve. But we do see that the students with intellectual disability and neurodiversity take longer to learn those skills. And so when we don't start in high school, when we don't start even younger, then we are really running up against the clock when they come to college. We only have them for a maximum of 4 years. And that's just a lot of missed learning opportunities when they show up at 18, and these programs go up to 26 years old. So we might have a student who starts at 24. And so there have been all of these missed opportunities for learning because it was kind of, the focus was on different things, was on academics. Parents, we talk in the book about barriers to teaching independence, and there are a lot of them. And so, coming at it from the college side, seeing how that the lack of independent skills really impacts our students socially and just their ability to live independently. And so we came together to try to tackle it from both ends, basically.
We just had a college transition summit a couple months ago. And again, there so much focus is on preparing students academically, right? Making sure they have all the prerequisite courses, that they are, have all of their accommodations lined up for when they get there. But the life skills, the living skills, the daily living skills that you're talking about are often overlooked. And in the book, you talk about how parental or caregiver continual supervision can create a culture of dependence. And I'd love for you to explain kind of what that looks like and how parents can avoid unintentionally, causing that cycle.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a story from a parent who has given me permission to share. When students come to Auburn, we ask for interviews, right? So we do a long interview process. It's a day and a half. And we do all kinds of assessments. We have the parents do assessments and the students do assessments. We check for safety skills, right? Can they cross the street safely? What happens if they, get lost? What do they do? How do they seek help? And parts of these assessments include asking parents, how independent is your student in all of these daily living tasks? And we had, these parents are filling out these forms to the best of their ability, of course. And, this parent, I was talking to her after her child had been admitted to the program, and we were talking about these prep activities that we do. We have them do these online activities before they come to campus. And one of them is on medication. So, do they take their medication? Do they know what the medicine is for? Do they know when to take it? Do they know if it needs to be taken with food or water, specific drinks, right? Some of them say take with milk, right? Do they know what happens if they stop taking their medication? Do they know how to get into the bottles? All of these things. And the mom said, oh my gosh, I said he was independent. But independent to me meant just taking the pills in his hand and putting them in his mouth and swallowing them. But I was the one who was opening the bottles, counting them out, making sure they were on time, putting them next to his orange juice glass. And so she, again, to the best of her ability, he was independent. Compared to her having to crush them up and put them in applesauce, he was independent, but not actually fully independent in that area. And so, again, part of it is parents are not aware of all the support that they're providing. And then they also don't know how to get out of the support. They don't know how, we call it fading. They don't know how to fade themselves out of the routine because they've been doing it for 18 years, 20 years, 22 years. And so it's a really tough nut to crack. They are doing their best, and we admire all the work that they have gotten from applesauce to swallowing pills on their own. But it's this extra piece that they maybe aren't aware of that they are providing support.
Just to jump in, so when we sat down initially to draft out the outline for this book, our plan had been to write a book to actually get the kids ready for what Christine was just talking about, that level of independence. And as we were working on it, I said, this is way too much, too fast. Did we need to go all the way back to, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, where you should be fading yourself as a parent from showering your kid? Because that starts to get really awkward, right? There's no parent that wants to still be showering their kid after they've hit puberty. There's no parent who wants to have their kid be completely dependent on them just to get a simple snack, right, at 15 years old. So this book is on a much more basic level than the story that Christine, the ultimate goal is to eventually get to what Christine just spoke about. But we started with, like, you shouldn't be giving verbal directives through the entire toothbrush routine, because that means your kid can't actually brush their teeth without you standing there as part of the routine. So this book focuses on how do you fade the parent from showering, from brushing your teeth, from getting dressed, the sort of the basic daily living skills.
Right. And it seems that there are things that parents should be asking themselves when thinking about their child's future independence. And a great question you pose in the book is, what would my child do if I didn't help them? Right. Can you talk more about things that parents should be considering?
Well, that question was put in almost specifically geared toward the story that Christine just told. There's a lot of parents think that their kids are independent, but when we actually say to them, if you weren't there, you didn't get out of bed, if you were away, and would your child get up and make it out the door to school on time, we get a very different answer. And so we're really trying to bring some awareness to, like Christine said, how much your presence is affecting your child's ability to do things, how much you're speaking to them and reminding them and pointing and directing, all of these things that are happening. That, again, when you're in college, I love to tell parents that Christine's program at Auburn, once the parents drop the kids off, the parents aren't supposed to go back on campus for, 6 weeks, Christine? 6 weeks. And I tell parents that, like, when I'm working with my kids who are younger, I said, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about that if you had to drop them off on a college campus and actually be away from them for 6 weeks, how would they be able to function?
And some parents, again, even their presence, right? As the child, maybe I don't get out of bed until I hear my parents' feet outside of my room and I hear my door open. And actually, that's the signal for me to get up, not my alarm clock, not the time, not the sun coming in through the window. It's that I am waiting. And again, this is not conscious thought, right? People are not thinking like, but I'm that way. What is the absolute last moment that I can possibly get out of bed? And so again, when we are thinking about that in college, a lot of typically developing students just don't get out of bed. And the consequences, they fail their classes, right? But those are we call them distal. They're so distant in the consequence that they don't necessarily impact that daily behavior. And so, again, we would like students to have those skills. And again, we help them brush up on those skills. But if they are used to getting themselves up at a certain time, if they are used to getting dressed by themselves, and you are downstairs making breakfast and you are not in that routine, that prepares them so much better than you having to show up at the door and remind them to get dressed, remind them that it's cold outside, remind them to brush their teeth after breakfast, all of these things.
Right. And I think, something that you're highlighting is the fact that so many parents don't realize how much they're doing for their children, right?
Exactly right.
It's just been a habit and they've been doing it all along, but they don't realize, the role, even again, a nonverbal cue, such as opening the door, prompts the child to do an action. And what happens if you're not providing that nonverbal cue?
Right. And that gets into, the idea that these skills are not taught in school. And if there are no therapists at home pointing this out to the parents, and not only are you in the habit, but you don't even know how to get out of the habit, right? I mean, we wrote this book specifically geared towards parents because although in a perfect world, we would love to think that every parent picking this up has an amazing therapist working with them at home to help them with their child, to teach their child. The reality is a lot of parents don't have that, especially those that are in the more rural areas. They just don't have access to it. And so it's like a double whammy. Like we're in the habit and then we don't have the skills we need to get out of it.
Right. And you emphasize in the book the importance of teaching daily living skills. Like you're saying, this is not something that's taught at school. Are there essential life skills that parents should focus on, regardless of a child's age, for at least a place to start with their child?
So my impulse, again, are the skills that keep them healthy. So there's some, and I'm a researcher. So, there's research on the really rough outcomes for people with bad tooth health, for example. So if you have a neurodiverse child who is not brushing their teeth, there are studies that show that what ends up happening is they end up having to be put under full anesthesia. And by the time they're under full anesthesia, they've got 3 rotten teeth and 5 cavities. And people with intellectual disability and autism tend to have worse outcomes when recovering from surgery. I mean, because that's surgery at that point, right? Recovering from surgery. And so those kinds of things, that's my take on it, is things that keep your child healthy, making healthy decisions about food. A lot of our students come to campus, and again, they do the thing that typically developing students do, but they have 3 Frappuccinos a day because we have an on-campus Starbucks and it's right there. And Frappuccinos are in fact delicious. And so, but that's partly because their parents have controlled the food that they've eaten. Again, maybe not even realizing it, right? Parent makes the grocery list, parent does the grocery shopping, child does not have input on what they eat or don't eat. So that's where my priorities are. Kristin has different ones because she works with the younger folks. So I'm excited to hear her answer.
So this particular book focuses more on the basic things like brushing your teeth, showering, getting dressed, starting to be able to go through like a morning or an evening routine to get ready for school or get ready for bed, that sort of stuff. What I will say is that, the age does matter, right? Because if you have a 4-year-old, you're not expecting a 4-year-old to shower themselves, right? And the child's developmental level matters. Like there were 2 chapters that we spent a lot of time on, chapters 2 and 3, which the chapter 2 discusses the prerequisite skills that the child should have in order to be ready to go through these activities successfully. It also discusses some challenging behavior that we don't want to have present. So, for example, if you have a child who's engaging in pica, you're not going to leave them alone in the bathroom to take a shower. They could drink the shampoo, like it's not safe, right? And then chapter 3 discusses what the parents, like what's expected of the parents and what they need to do to be ready. So the book's not for everybody. But by going through those chapters, you get a better feel for if this is for you. Our biggest thing was, can we get these parents when the children are still 7, 8, 9, 10, like we were saying, and so that they're being more independent, so that they're not still showering them, brushing their teeth, getting them dressed when they're 15.
Right. And in the book, you're using behavioral science to inform how you teach independence. And we know that the best outcomes occur when we can start early, when we can start building skills, when we have interventions that are implemented early. You talk about the concept of task analysis. And can you talk about how that's important for building independence and what it is?
Yeah. So task analysis is a process, and then it also creates a product. So you break down the classic that we come back to always is the toothbrushing routine. So for parents who, and maybe typically developing adults, toothbrushing is one thing. It probably isn't even on your to-do list. It's just part of your morning and evening routine. You just do it without thinking about it. Now, for people who do not have that skill yet, people who are neurodiverse, people who have intellectual disability or autism, that actually is something like 20 steps. Walk to the bathroom, get out your toothbrush, get out the toothpaste, turn on the faucet, wet the toothbrush, unscrew the cap, squeeze out an appropriate amount of toothpaste, right? And it's not what's in the commercial. That's not actually an appropriate amount. That's way too much toothpaste. Right. And so the task analysis takes this big multi-step thing, breaks it down into these tiny steps. And that allows you, first of all, to learn the order of the task, right? Because there's a million, right? You could not wet your toothbrush, you could put, but it teaches the order of the task. And then it also allows you to pinpoint where things may go awry. So instead of saying, my kid can't brush their teeth, which is a common thing that we hear, right? They simply can't. It's too much. I brush their teeth for them. But when you break it down, you might actually see that they can walk into the bathroom, they can turn on the water, they can find their toothbrush and their toothpaste. But where it goes wonky is when they have the fine motor skill to twist the cap off of the toothpaste. Well, then you have something to work on versus, oh no, the whole routine is shot. The whole thing is, I can't even, right? And so it breaks it into these steps to where you can target, you can work on that. You can get other OTs help with fine motor skills all the time. Or you can buy a child-friendly toothpaste dispenser. So we talk about accommodating and modifying in the book, but making it accessible, because a toothpaste dispenser is something that your child can take with them to college. And it doesn't depend on you as the parent. So it's something that you can remove yourself out of instead of having to stand there and unscrew the cap on the toothpaste. And so again, it helps by breaking it all down for the person with a disability. We also talk about making it visual, making it written. There are ways to make the task analysis a part of the routine that, again, they can take with them. No one cares if you have a checklist in your bathroom. When you're an adult, I could have a checklist in my bathroom. No one would know. It's my bathroom. And then you can use that to pinpoint where the routine, there are maybe holes in your child's repertoire, skills they don't have, as opposed to just being like, well, we just can't, which is a very reasonable response. But it kind of helps you to get over that hump of we just can't.
Yes. And it's so interesting, as you're describing, breaking down the task of brushing your teeth into those smaller chunks. I mean, that's something we do in the educational setting all the time to support kids, but we often don't think about employing those same strategies in the home environment and for daily living skills.
And it's hard. I mean, it's not like the schools have a shower and they're going to teach your child how to shower themselves. Like, some of these things really need to happen in the home. And you have so much of a better chance of having natural reinforcement occur if your child's getting ready for school and then they're actually leaving for school, versus how do you contrive that when you're already at school and you're not in your home where it's happening.
Right. And you also, you talked about modifications and accommodations, but you also discussed the concept, which is related, of empowering versus enabling, which I think is such an important distinction for parents. Can you talk about those two things? And because I think I see a lot of parents who are unintentionally enabling rather than empowering their children.
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes down to what we were talking about before, is being in the habit. They don't think any of them are intentionally doing it. I don't even think most of them are aware that they're doing it or that there's another way to accomplish things. But yes, I have this conversation a lot with the parents when the kids are very little. I'm like, I know you're in a rush in the morning, but you putting your child's shoes on doesn't ever let them learn how to put the shoes on themselves. If you could leave yourself an extra few minutes and show them, prompt them, hand over hand, how to put their shoes on, now we're going to actually make some progress because they can learn to do it themselves. And then they are empowered to take care of things for themselves. Nobody wants to have everything done for them, right? It takes away our ability to make choices and have any sort of self-control over ourselves. Christine, I don't know if you want to add to that, like on a higher level.
Yeah. And I think the shoe example is a great one, because then you build prompt dependency. Or you build dependency in general. So if I have to wait, think about you as an adult. If I had to wait for my partner to do something before I left the house every time, that is not a great dynamic, right? And again, sometimes your child may be ready before you, right? Maybe you're the one running late, and actually your child has been sitting on the stairs for 5 minutes waiting for you to be done with what you need to do. And they could have put on their shoes, but because you haven't taught them, now you're 5 minutes late and putting on their shoes, and they're not learning. And if we wait until the morning routine, so another thing we talk about in the book is trying to do things at different times when you aren't rushed. So if you are only having the shoe problem in the morning because you're not going to the park, because you're not going out on the weekends, or, whatever, that is also a symptom of a problem, right? There should be many times when your child puts on their own shoes to go out in the backyard to play, to walk again to the park, to go to the grocery store. So you don't have to work on it in the morning when you're both cranky and tired and running on fumes, but you can work on it when you're going out in these other times, and then generalize that skill, right? If you teach them to put on their shoes when it's time for the park, they can also learn to do it when it's first thing in the morning. And so taking that pressure off of yourself to like, oh, well, we have to teach it in this time and right now. And you just don't. You just don't have to. There are other times, and being proactive and thinking about that. But that's hard, right? Your parents are doing a million things, and we really went out of our way to, speak to parents, to be empathetic, to see their side of things, and find these workarounds.
I think it's also important to note that many times with a neurotypical child, their desire to be independent comes in fairly young, so by 3 years old, 4 years old, they want to do things for themselves. And that doesn't always happen with children that have developmental disabilities. And so they're more likely to become prompt dependent and not even attempt to put their shoe on themselves. And they're just going to sit and wait for it to be done for them. And so the parents are missing out on that cue from their child to back off, right? Like if you think about a neurotypical child, by, I don't know, 8, 9, whatever age it is, the parent, even younger, the child doesn't want the parent in the bathroom anymore while they're showering. They want to go in there and shower. They want privacy. They want to use the toilet in privacy. But if you're not getting that cue from your child, it's very easy to keep doing it and stay in the habit.
And even younger, I babysat for a little girl when I was in college, and she was probably 2, and
Mm-hmm.
we were raking leaves, and her name was Samantha, but she went by
Mm-hmm.
Sammy, and she couldn't say her S's, so she was Hammy. And so it was Hammy do dat, teen no do dat, Hammy do it. And I was like, okay, Hammy is going to rake the leaves. And that may not happen for some of our kids with developmental disabilities. And again, it's not that the parents are intentionally overstepping. If their child has something going on where they cannot wipe themselves adequately, let's say while they use the toilet, then they have to be involved. But again, it's how to get yourself minimally involved and then removed. And we talk about this in the book. You might get some pushback from your kid, depending on how old they are. If they're used to, something being a level 1 difficulty, and because they were doing 10%, and now you're saying, no, you're going to do 100%. Well, that's hard. That's difficult. You're telling me that my 10% is no longer adequate, and I have to up it by 90%. That's significant. And so, we teach the parents to remove themselves slowly. It's not like we're saying, oh, shoes are your problem now, kid. No, right? It's the teaching pieces that come along that we go through in the book that are part of that process.
Right. And the examples that you use can be used in so many other daily living tasks and independent skills. I mean, you use the example of brushing the teeth, but for older kids who perhaps have mastered that, it often is getting the things in the backpack to take to school, because the parents are the ones putting the lunchbox in, filling up the water bottle, closing the water bottle, making sure they have everything, when maybe they need a checklist. They have that visual cue where they can check for themselves, and parents can obviously oversee that process. But when I think about the transition to college, that's another thing that they're going to have to make sure that they have a pencil to take notes, that they have a notebook, that they have all the things they need in that setting to be able to engage and get everything they need out of that class.
This was a big thing that came up, well, actually, for showering, because I see often, and Christine has seen it also on her end, where you cannot take a shower and then leave the bathroom naked. You need to have some sort of a game plan. So either you need to wrap a towel around yourself to go back to your bedroom to get dressed and then put the towel back in the bathroom, or you need to prepare ahead and get your pajamas and bring them into the bathroom to get changed in there. And so that sort of that planning ahead is very important, and knowing boundaries, right? Because I tell the parents, like, this is not okay even at 8. And Christine has cases where, like, in college, like, no, we can't do that. Like, you have 3 roommates now.
Yep. And I mean, I am from the time when you shared a bathroom with 40 people in college, right? That is not the way now. Now they have suites, and 4 people share a bathroom or 2 people share a bathroom. But when I was in college, I didn't have to clean the bathroom, right? There was a janitorial staff, and so I was not in charge of keeping a bathroom clean. Well, if you're in a dorm, you are responsible for keeping the bathroom clean. And so, the demands have shifted. And I think, even parents who went to, I'm a millennial, I'm in my 30s. And so, I went to college, it's been a minute. But a lot of parents are in that same boat where they're thinking about, well, this was my experience, or I didn't have to deal with this. But college is different now. Independent living is different now. You don't need to be able to balance a checkbook, but you do need to know how a debit card and your online bank account works, and having an app, and what scams are that come through over text message. Like, there are different skills that your child may need that you didn't necessarily need going to college or being an independent adult. And it's hard. It's really hard for parents to think that far ahead.
Yes. And I think many parents probably listening to this conversation might feel overwhelmed and unsure about where to even start. Do you have advice for parents who want to begin fostering more independence right now? And some might feel like it's too late. My child is 16 and I'm still getting them up in the morning and still cueing them to reminding them to shower, reminding them to brush their teeth, even though they can do those things on their own. What are your thoughts and advice for parents?
It's never too late to start, right? If it was never taught, then you have no way of knowing if your child's capable of doing it. So you might as well try. As far as where to start, we try to start at the beginning. That being said, again, we have those 2 chapters, 2 and 3, that go over sort of the prereqs and what's needed in order for the program to be successful. So my advice would be is to get the book, read through chapter 1, which is, let's look at the really big picture and what sort of the end goal is, right? And now let's look at chapters 2 and 3. And do you have these prereq skills that you need to start the book? And if you don't, well, now you have a list.
Yeah, the skills to work on, right?
Exactly. So I think it gives you, even if you then need to get a different book or get some sort of help to get those prereq skills, and at least you know what it is that you need to get in place in order to then work through the activities.
So even, once we get through chapter 2 and 3, if the book is working for you, if you've, got those things down, we have you select one routine. So we are not saying tomorrow, change your entire life, do things completely differently, A to Z, right? We start small. And so again, I think that overwhelming feeling, we'd really try to bring it down to a really manageable level. And, we talked about the pros and cons of different routines, right? If the routine happens multiple times a day, 7 days a week, that's more practice opportunities. That's more, and again, the skills, use it or lose it. So if you are only using a skill once a week, you are likely to lose it. Whereas something that's done every day, like brushing teeth or showering, or, getting ready in the morning, going to bed, those all happen every day. And so, kind of thinking about that, right, that's something that you can be consistent with is going to get you a lot further than like, we're going to teach packing your backpack. Okay. That happens 5 days a week, maybe for some students. All students are different. And then if it's Christmas break, winter break, if it's spring break, if it's summer break. So it's also like thinking about the context, thinking about the stuff that your child does every day is a good place, just to start considering places to build independence. I think, again, it can feel overwhelming, but our book says pick one. Pick one, start with one routine, start there, start with one task analysis, start with one thing, because it is overwhelming. And even if you have, therapists coming into your home, that's a limited amount of time and you have to be thinking about what to, use people's time with. Your time is valuable too. So considering, what I always say, get the most bang for your buck, right? If you can get yourself out of toothbrushing, that's twice a day that you then are out of a routine.
Right.
You can build on that success.
I mean, your book provides such wonderful vignettes and illustrates real life success stories, which I think is wonderful. And it'll be really encouraging for parents. And I love the way your book shifts the focus from challenges to possibilities. And so this has been such a wonderful discussion now, and it seems like time has just flown by. But before we wrap up, can you share where our listeners can find your book, Spectrum of Independence, and learn more about your work?
Sure. The book is available on Amazon and on Guilford's website. And then there's also a Spectrum of Independence website, spectrumofindependence.com.
Perfect. And I'll be sure to put links in the show notes to where people can go to purchase the book and a link to the website. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And again, amazing practical strategies that are going to help a lot of families. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation. If you found this conversation helpful, please subscribe and be sure to head over to childnexus.com and get on our email list so you'll have access to even more resources. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.